A Musical Life with legendary violinist Aaron Rosand, Part 2. Described by the New York Times critic Harold Schonberg as one of the great living exponents of romantic violin music, Aaron Rosand has captivated audiences and critics the world over. His recordings have been hailed by Gramophone magazine as some of the greatest recordings of this century. For over 50 years, Mr. Rosand performed on the Kochanski 1741 Guarneri violin. In 2009, he sold it for $10 million and subsequently donated $1.5 million of the proceeds to the Curtis Institute of Music, where he studied as a student of Ephraim Zimbalist and where he currently teaches a new generation of master violinists. This episode of A Musical Life is brought to you by Audible.com, the leading source of audiobooks online with over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, or MP3 player. Visit audibletrial.com/A Musical Life and get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial. Welcome to A Musical Life. I'm Hugh Sung. In part 2 of my interview with violinist Aaron Rosand, we delve into the obstacles he faced early in his career, the wisdom he shares with his students about life as a musician, as well as why he fell in love with his beloved Kochanski 1741 Guarneri violin, the violin that was his voice for 50 years. You've had an extraordinary career, of course, but not without some challenges. Now, last year you revealed in a very candid memoir to slipdisc.com about the complex relationship and obstacles you faced with your contemporary Isaac Stern. These are stories that you actually told me in private for many, many years. If you could go back in time, what advice would you have for your younger self?
Beginning a career today is a difficult proposition. Not that it was easy when I first began my career, because when you think of the competition I had and the artists that I mentioned to you, they're all in their prime. And here I was, an American upstart that was just trying to begin a career, and the opportunities were quite limited at that time. Even New York Philharmonic season was only 28, 30 weeks long, and the artists were booked 3-4 years in advance, so it wasn't such an easy matter to start a career. But the advice that I give to this young generation is to start a career, first of all, is more difficult. The competition is one way of attracting attention to yourself. The competition, if run fairly, squarely, and very few of them are these days. Unfortunately, there's so much corruption, and this is one of the missions that I'm trying to accomplish, and that is to establish a rule that when a teacher is chosen to be a juror, that he is not allowed to put one of his students in the competition. And unfortunately, many of the the competitions, they're just not abiding by this rule, and the results are sometimes so twisted it doesn't make any sense. However, the advice that I give to young players is, if you get your chance and you take advantage of it, whether it's an important recital or whether it's an appearance with orchestra, you must not only be an artist, but there's a political correctness that is so important in maintaining a career. And if you want my advice as to how to handle that, first of all, as well as studying your music, you better study your books and your history and become educated in more fields than just knowing where to put your fingers. It's very, very necessary to respect those that are responsible for putting on your concerts, those that are managing your concerts, those people that are supporting and making it possible for you to play your concert, and to keep relationships, good relationship, because the music world is not a big world. Yes, it appeals to many, but the music business is a small business, and it's pretty wise not to antagonize anyone in the field, unless you have pretty good reason to start some argument. But it's wise to maintain good relationship, good behavior. My advice to many of you young people is to learn more than one or two languages, because the world is becoming smaller. It's so important to learn how to speak some French, some German, some Spanish, and you really have to consider yourself a world citizen. And when you see some of the most successful of the artists today, look at Anne-Sophie Mutter. She's as adept in English as she is in German and other languages too. You see other great players. They are cultivated individuals, cultivated and sophisticated, and that's what you have to become.
If you were imagining yourself, thinking back to how you were in your 20s perhaps, or even maybe in your 30s, and would the advice that you just gave, do you think that would have helped make your career a little easier?
Yes.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Definitely. That's why I'm giving that sort of advice. I was very introverted actually when I began. I knew I could play violin well, but I wasn't very good at maintaining some of these important relationships with people that can help.
You were so focused on your art, perhaps.
I was so focused, and I practiced my violin religiously. I was very devoted and very dedicated to my art, and I didn't care if I wrote to this particular person, whatever it was. I would rather take the 2 hours and practice my violin.
And perhaps at the expense of the...
At the expense of, yeah, even furthering my career.
Interesting. In 2009, you sold your beloved Kochanski Guarneri del Gesù, the violin you had performed and recorded with for more than 50 years, for about $10 million. And I remember reading the New York Times article. You had described it as having left your soul behind. Can you tell me what made you fall in love with that particular violin?
When I was just beginning my career, I'm going back now to the 1950s, after the big war. I had no money. I had no job. I just had my talent, and I had to borrow violins every time I was given a chance to play somewhere. I borrowed an instrument from, at that time, the major dealer in New York was Rembert Wurlitzer, the Wurlitzer Company. And he kept me supplied with decent violins. I played Stradivari, and one of the best violins that he had I always made them sound pretty good, and took them back and played them for prospective buyers, so I was kind of a middleman, but always had a good violin to play on, but I didn't own a violin myself. And I came to experiment and play on at least 30 or 40 of the greatest violins that were around at that particular time. And it was one day, and it was quite by chance, when a violin collector that I knew, he said, if you think my violin is good, he said, you ought to see Joe's, whoever Joe was at that particular. He was a friend of his. And apparently in Wurlitzer's vault, there was the violin that was being kept there for 25 years. It was Kochanski Violin, Del Gesù, the Guarneri Del Gesù. And they took it out, and the strings were old, and I turned it up, and I played a few notes on it. And I fell so in love with that sound. I realized, after all these fine violins I'm playing on, when I just played a few bars, I thought, this is the voice of my dreams.
How do you describe that voice?
Oh my God, it's such a beautiful, like one of the great tenors or great sopranos or something. It just tore my heart out, and I never forgot it. And I used to go in every other day when I was in New York. I'd go in the back room, and he would take out the violin. I was not allowed to use that violin because it belonged to a man who unfortunately had Parkinson's disease, and he would come in once a week just to see the violin, to take it out of the vault to look at it, and Mr. Wurlitzer never knew when he would show up, so he couldn't allow me to use the violin in case the man would show up and want to see it.
Now, had this man previously been a violinist?
Yeah, he was a violinist.
He was a violinist.
He was the associate concertmaster or something in the Minneapolis Symphony many years ago. And then he went into business in Coney Island business in I forgot what they call it in New Jersey, with the rides and amusement park business. And he did very well. And the violin belonged to Paul Kochanski for 3 or 4 years, and he was a member of the family. And when Paul Kochanski died, he bought that violin from him and put it in the vault. That's actually the inside story of what happened. So it remained in the family. And then I bought the violin in 1957. 1957, when it was miraculous. I'm not going to get into the whole story of how it came into my hands.
It's been documented online. It's a remarkable stock investment with chock full of nuts, right?
Chock full of price, precisely. And it took some kind of a miracle, to even come into my hands, because it was one of the finest violins around at that time. And I bought it in 1957 and played on it for 53 years. And it was painful, because that voice was something that became my voice in all the recordings that I eventually made from 1957 on. It also caused the bitter breakup in my relationship with Isaac Stern, because he wanted that violin.
Oh,
I
interesting.
didn't mention that to you.
A bit of a
He
bit of a
wanted-
love triangle. It sounds
He
like.
wanted that, and the fact that it wound up in my hands, he became a bitter enemy.
Oh my. Now, and yet, now we know. I've heard so much of your identity through that particular the Kochanski, Del Jesu, and yet I've experienced this. No matter what fiddle you pick up, your characteristic sound is still there. I've heard you take a cheap violin, play on it, and it sounds like $1 million masterpiece. Now, clearly, there is.
Hugh, that's an exaggeration.
It is not. It is not. I'm a witness to this.
Well,
I've seen you. I've seen you pick up some real, cheap violins, and you put them on your hand. It is unbelievable.
I told you the secret a little earlier. I told you about drawing the bow over the string. It's how you draw the bow over the string that makes it sound. You can make a cigar box sound pretty decent if you draw the bow well.
It's incredible. So it seems to me the secret's in the bow, not so much in the fiddle.
You are right.
So why aren't bows being sold for, or are they? Are bows
They
being
are bows. Yeah. My goodness, the price of bows have mounted. They're beyond belief right now. The Tourt bows are being sold for $200,000-$300,000.
My goodness.
The Pecot bows are $100,000 to $250,000.
What is the characteristic of these incredible bows? What makes these bows so amazing?
Well, it's a rather interesting thing that the bow takes on the character of the country that it comes from in the same way that the violins do. Now, the Italian violins are the most sought after. They have the Italian voice. But the Italians can't make a bow. The French make the bow. The French made the greatest bows that were ever created.
How about that?
It's amazing, really. And what makes that sound? It's Pernambuco, which is basically the wood that is being used to make the bow. But there's an art to making it. It's the way the bow vibrates. Yes, you put the horsehair on there, but it's the way that bow vibrates, the way that it's made, the way it's cambered, that creates the sound, the vibration of the bow.
Now, I know from being with you that there's a remarkably talented American violin maker, Widenhouse. I forget. You have to remind me.
Yes.
His first name again was
Kurt Widenhouse.
Yes, Kurt Widenhouse. His instruments are remarkable.
He's one of the greatest makers in the world today. For the violins are certainly underpriced. He made this remarkable copy of my Kochanski Guarneris that I'm using at the present time. And in some respects, it's beginning. He made an exact copy of the violin, down to the detail, all the little scratches and all the little marks, it's beginning to take on the characteristics actually of the Guarneris of the past. However, nothing. It still takes a seasoning process of a couple of 100 years, or at least 100 years.
Well, I was wondering. We mentioned the Widenhouse, and there are many talented violin makers. Are there the same level of talented bow makers around today?
It's harder to find. There are many bow makers. There's something that I find fascinating, actually, in bows. I think that there's an aging process even in the wood of the bow that lends itself to making a better or more refined sound, more sophisticated sound. And the Tourt bows, for example, I owned one of the great Tourt bows called the Balakovich Tourt. The bow was made around 1775. 1775. It's pretty amazing to think that it survived because it's so easy to drop a bow, fall out of your hand, or even in the reherring process to crack the tip or crack the frog. So that they remain in good condition is a miracle. of its own. But I own one of those great tourte bows, and it's not even the weight of the stick. Many young people think a heavier bow will produce a bigger tone, because today there's this obsession with bigger tone. Everything is loud and louder. You see, even in the jazz world, it's deafening with electric guitars and banging on the drum. There's no subtlety anymore, and the same. Even young people, when they want to buy a bow, they're buying heavier bows, thinking a heavier bow is going to produce a bigger tone, and that's a fallacy. Because in the tourte bow that I had, it was only 55 grams, which is very light. No, most bows are somewhere in the 60 to 62 range.
That's amazing.
60 grams. And this bow, 55, it didn't feel light at all and produced the sound that was just electric in character.
So that less weight gives you finer control or response.
Not necessarily. Once again, it's the way it's cut, the way it's shaped, it's the piece of wood. I think the great masters like Tourte, like Peccat, like Varan, they knew exactly what they were after with the wood, how the type of sound that the wood would produce. How about that?
Amazing.
It's a gift. You talk about Weidenhaus. He has a gift for knowing how the back, the spruce and the maple, how they're going to match and what it's going to sound like. I've had this discussion with him many times, and he can almost tell what the violin is going to sound like before he puts top and back and glues them together.
Just from the look and feel of
he knows the wood, the grain of the wood. And isn't that interesting?
It's fascinating. I want to jump to a lighter subject. You are a fine connoisseur of cigars and single malt scotches. I remember our trips to Japan and always having my first taste of Suntory. What was that, Suntory?
Suntory whiskey.
You introduced me to the fine world of single malts, and we've had an Oban together at your place. And,
my goodness, yes.
So I'm curious. Can you tell me how you came to love cigars, and can you tell me what your current favorite single malts are?
Oh boy, well, that's an easy subject to expound upon, because I became a cigar lover, which is rather interesting. When I was in my poor youth, I grew up very, my family not well off at all. My father had trouble making food on the table when I was a youngster. And when I was about 12 years old, some man heard me play, and he decided to do something about my education because because I impressed him so much with the violin playing that I should begin studying at the Chicago Musical College. Well, that man turned out to be Max Adler, who was one of the founders of Sears and Roebuck, the big company. And he was a fan, a great aficionado of the violin because he played violin himself. He owned a couple of violins. So he arranged this scholarship for me to study at the Chicago Musical College with a man who really began my great career. He was the illegitimate son of Eugene Izai. But anyway, every time I went to visit this Mr. Max Adler, every time I went into his office shaking like a leaf, he had that big cigar in his mouth. And had that wonderful smell of the Havana cigar, and it was to me it represented wealth, boy, the way he sat there chewing on that cigar, and here I'm shaking in my boots, and I had to report to him regularly. And then my first time I came to Curtis Institute, and I walked into the studio of Ephraim Zimbalist, and there was that familiar smell of the Havana cigar. And I thought, oh my God. And then I realized that Zimbalist was smoking between the less smoking that wonderful Havana cigar. It didn't smell bad to me. It smelled like money. So I never smoked a cigarette. I began smoking cigars.
You went right for the top.
Because that was the mark of wealth.
And tell me a little bit about how you came to appreciate fine single malts.
Well, the first time I tasted Scotch, I thought, gee, this is like medicine. It was an awful taste. And I wasn't much of a drinker in my youth, and I don't even know how it suddenly developed a taste for Scotch. But there really is no whiskey quite like it. The old days, I guess, you used to have martinis and Manhattans and old fashions and things like that. But I suddenly learned to drink a Scotch. As the single malt came many, many years later, I guess. That's after success when you can afford it.
They are expensive. So what are some of your favorite brands these days?
To this day...
You actually have an interesting lesson policy, don't you, with some of your students, some of your scholarship students, and those who've graduated and come back for lessons. You have a new lesson policy,
I give more scholarship lessons than you can imagine, and the fee is always a bottle of Johnny Walker Black.
There you go.
That's my favorite Scotch. Even better than all. I have all the single malts. I've got them lined up in my everything from Lagavulin to all the famous ones. But I still prefer Johnny Walker.
If you don't want those extra bottles, you can give them to me.
All right, come over. You'll get some of the single malts.
Lovely. We just had a lovely dinner together, and we were recalling some of our experiences, and I recall the wonderful dishes you cooked. You were an incredible chef. I remember one pasta dish you made. It was just simply the most delicious pasta I think I'd ever had in my life. You are, in addition to a cigar connoisseur and an appreciator of fine scotches, Johnny Walker Black, but you were also a very fine cook. And you've even mentioned now that you prefer cooking to going out to restaurants because it's hard to find a good meal at restaurants these days. Can you tell me some of your favorite dishes to prepare and just maybe talk a little bit about your love of cooking?
Well, cooking has always been a hobby for me. I think it's one of the favorite pastimes of the traveling musician. When I was first beginning my touring and the old days of trains and making stops in the U.S. or other, we'd collect all the information about the best restaurants that in every city, and this is part of the game. People often have asked me, "Oh gosh, you were here, you were there. Did you see this and did you see that?" And my response is, yeah, I saw the concert hall. I remember the hotel. I remember a couple of the restaurants, and I don't remember much else about the city that I visited.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not altogether true, but I try to make light of it. But cooking became a very important part of the travels. It was always important to eat well or to find out what the specialties were in every country or in every particular restaurant. Oh, I had some good experience. I had some bad experiences. I'll never forget my first experience in Louisiana at the New Orleans. Those were the good days with all those the jazz bands and the restaurants, Antoine's, and forget the name a couple of the other places. That's before the terrible storm, but I'll never forget going down. I couldn't resist. It was prior to the concert, having shrimp prepared in a certain style. They were very, very hot, very spicy shrimp, and I drank an awful lot of water before the thing. It was absolutely delicious, but I remember drinking an excessive amount of liquid prior to the concert, and then walking out on stage, and my hands were so wet they were sliding all over the fiddle. and I learned a nasty lesson about never eating spicy food before playing a concert. In fact, I even learned that you don't eat very much before a concert, because there was a very bad experience trying to keep my hands on the violin while I was playing. I never forgot that. But cooking is a hobby of mine. I must say that when I'm in the kitchen, you can't even talk to me, because my favorite game is to see what there is in the fridge, and to see what I could create around whatever there is. Make it interesting, make it palatable, make it something that was special. I keep a lot of cooking wine. I use a lot of brandy in my. I can't drink brandy, but I use it for cooking.
You're making me hungry now. I got to come over for a meal.
But I do all sorts of things, and once again, rarely do I resort to a cooking book. I like to create my own recipes, but I have found that most of the restaurants today, in this nouvelle cuisine, that I just don't care for it at all, because I don't like things that are half cooked or uncooked. I don't like mixing nuts and fruits and everything with I'm more traditional. That's the one thing where I draw the line. I don't want watermelon in my salad. It's the time. So, and I don't want nuts all over the meat that I eat. So this is the sort of thing. I really don't go for the color. I believe that there has to be color coordination and making a plate nice, but I'm not so much. I'm more interested in the taste, not the array of color on your plate. A speck here and a speck there, that doesn't appeal to me. Anyway, it's great fun.
So when you're not working, when you're not teaching these days, what sorts of music do you like to listen to?
Unfortunately, you don't hear good jazz anymore. I was a great lover of jazz. And even the big bands and all that sort of thing. I have a great collection of recordings of everything from Art Tatum to all, you ever hear Art Tatum?
Of course. Oh, he's amazing. Oh, my goodness.
Pianist, I kind of miss really good jazz. That was something that I thought was special.
Is there a particular piece of music that had a significant impact in your life?
Are you speaking classical or
any kind of music? And if there's a particular piece that moved you in a particular way that is become...
Remember there's something called Joe There's an old da da dee da 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 dee da dee da da dee. That's a great old song.
Something Called Joe, is that the name of the
something,
song?
yeah. The name of the song. It was done by the great saxophone player of what was the great Duke Ellington. Duke Ellington's band, and I used to love that kind of stuff.
What was it about that song that moved you so much?
It's the way he played that saxophone, and I'm not crazy about saxophone playing, but it was so moving the way he did that. Just the way the way he gave that portamento there on the saxophone. That I was very, very touched every time I heard that. It was one of the favorite records I heard. And the old song Laura. I even learned how to play that on the piano.
How about that? How about that?
Laura is the face in the misty light. Footsteps that you hear down the hall.
I used to play some piano, Hugh. You didn't know that.
I didn't know that. This is a revelation for me.
You know that Eleanor Sokolov was my teacher?
Now that I didn't know. I interviewed her. She mentioned you as one of her students.
I was her student.
You used to call her Teach.
Teach. And she was angry with me because I was pretty good. But once I married my Eileen Fritzler, I never got near a piano again. I didn't touch a piano 70 years.
My last question for you, Aaron, and this has been such a lovely time chatting with you. What have you turned to during your personal and professional life? What have you turned to in your life that's really nourished you?
Nourished?
Nourished your soul, your spirit.
Well, music. Music and violin have been my life. And that is really my nourishment. It's my religion. It's everything. That the violin is very precious to me, and music is the most precious thing. I don't think there's anything more beautiful than the music and what you can do with music. I mean, aside from the spoken word, whether it's poetry or prose, but music is can be the most moving of expressive means, and I'm when I hear something that's done very beautifully, I get tears in my eyes. I get little goosebumps down my back. So I'm still very moved by something that is very beautiful.
Aaron, thank you so much for such a lovely time together, reminiscing old stories and just bringing back wonderful memories, playing with such a masterful violinist and a dear friend.
Well, Hugh, you've taken me back quite a few years. We had some incredible tours, and I've never known a pianist as sensitive and as accurate as you are. We've made quite a number of recordings. I rarely heard you even hit a bad note, which is so remarkable. The incredible control that you had in doing that. My compliments are to you.
Well, and again, I want to express my gratitude because I think you gave me a true vision of what music could be that was far beyond anything I had learned up to that point. You really opened my eyes and my ears to the creative possibilities. So for that, I'm eternally in your debt. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hugh. It's a pleasure doing this with you.
This episode of A Musical Life has been brought to you by Audible.com, the leading online source for great audiobooks for your iPhone, Android, or MP3 player. Audiobooks are a great way to make the most of your time while you're commuting or traveling for work, like so many musicians do. Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. If you'd like to dive deeper into the world of classical music, then I think you'll really enjoy How to Listen to and Understand Great Music by Professor Robert Greenberg. This comprehensive series of 48 lectures is designed to make music accessible to everyone who yearns to know it, regardless of prior training or knowledge. Filled with entertaining anecdotes in a witty, informative style, Professor Greenberg's lectures will give you a deeper understanding of the musical language and help you hear and understand what the greatest composers in history are actually saying to us. To download your free copy of How to Listen to and Understand Great Music or any other audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/A Musical Life. Again, that's audibletrial.com/A Musical Life for your free audiobook. For links to all the music featured in this episode, be sure to visit the show notes at amusicallife.com. You'll also find links to Aaron's website, recordings, and his 4-DVD musical memoir of live performances. And be sure to leave a comment or send me your feedback by email at stories@amusicallife.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you like this show, please tell a friend or share a link on Facebook or Twitter. Be sure to subscribe to A Musical Life through iTunes or Stitcher or with your favorite podcast playing app, and consider posting a review. I'd really appreciate that. Special thanks to Allison Pockris for story consultation and production assistance. Until next time, I'm Hugh Sung, and I wish you a musical life.